Welcome to Helping Organizations Thrive. Today I have the great pleasure of Andrew Deutsch. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks so much for having me.
No, it's good to have you on the show. I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit about you. I'm sure we'll get to know you as we go on the conversation as well. You're a global marketing and sales executive, converting every touch into an advocate for your brand, which we're going to come on to later on. You're the CEO of Fangled Technology, which is a company, a unique marketing and sales consulting organization, creating sales and marketing platforms that accelerate entry into global markets for small to medium-sized manufacturers. And you're also a podcast host for Fangledcast. I got that right, didn't I?
You did.
Yes. You have to be careful with that one. So just before we start, I want to get to know you a little bit more. So what do you love about what you do?
Who said I love what I do? I'm kidding.
Well, you're always smiling, Andrew. So when I see you, you're always very happy about something.
Yeah. No, I love what I do because every day it's something a little bit different, and I get to really dig into the creative side and learn as I go and get to work with great people.
Brilliant. And you've always done this, of what you're doing now in terms of your business?
In one form or another, yeah, for more years than I care to count these days.
Excellent stuff. And as we went back to your title of your, I just said at the start about being an advocate for your brand. Today we're talking about advocates within our business and sometimes externally. But I want us just to touch more on the whole internal advocates and
Sure.
Or brand advocates, company advocates, however you want to term it. And before we go there, because I think it's good to get some clarity of what we mean by an advocate and how does that sort of then play out. So from your perspective, how would you sort of define a sort of brand advocate for a company, or internal, I should say?
Yeah, well, a brand advocate is someone, whether they, and we make it clear, we're not talking about every customer becoming an advocate for your brand. That we assume is going to happen because we do great business, as our clients do great business. But as every touch becomes an advocate, because what an advocate is that person who has an affinity, has an affection, has a voracious positioning to a specific brand. So even if they can't do business with you, they would certainly encourage others to do that. So when the name comes up, it's a positive thought. They think of it in a productive way, in a way that benefits your company, as opposed to a negative advocacy, which means these guys have done things, they're horrible, they're whatever it is keeps me from wanting to do business.
So creating a positive view on a company through people, isn't it? That's ultimately what we're doing here. And obviously employees are massive, or should be, advocates of the company they work for. So how can we, and obviously, they're seeing it day in, day out, and obviously that can go really well and that can go not so well. So how do we create employees to become advocates for our business? What are the sort of things we need to think about, and also potentially what may be the sort of watch outs as we go along that journey?
Part of it goes down to the old story of you want employees who feel like they're part of the success of the company. That when the company is successful, it's because they're successful and they recognize what's in it for them. So when companies reward their employees by making sure that they really, what's the best word I'm looking for? That when an employee shows up at work in the morning, they know why they're there. They're proud that they're there. When they're out in public and they see the product, if it's something that's publicly shown or the industrial. A good example of a brand advocate, I was on a plane once, and the guy sitting next to me smiled and said, "Just so that you know, I made the connectors that hold the landing gear to this plane together." And I said, and if something goes wrong with those, they won't. I wouldn't be on this plane if I wasn't proud of what I did. He's an internal brand advocate for the company that made the connectors for the landing gear of the plane. So when you have employees that when I lived in Brazil, they would always say, how to translate, the people who would wear the company shirt when they're not at work. Those are the brand advocates for the company. There's such a sense of self in everything that the company does because they participate in the successes of the company and they're part of that success, and and they know that the company appreciates that.
And is there a link between sort of advocacy and company or employee engagement?
Absolutely. If you've got folks who show up to work, they don't, and I can give you some examples of it after I make the statement, but they don't even know what the product does. They don't know where it goes. They don't know what the end result of their work is. They're making a connector every day. They're in the plant. They're making it every day, and they have no idea where it goes, what it's used for. Now, if you're making a connector that then becomes part of the landing gear of airplanes, and you tell your employees, you realize that millions of people are safe today because you took the time to make that right, and you followed all the procedures, and we were 100% within spec, then all of a sudden they have a connection to it. So having purpose in what you're doing every day at work really matters. Even let's take it to the guy who cleans the office. Should know that by them taking great pride in cleaning the office and making that office a wonderful, comfortable place, the employees are happy. And when visitors come and they're so impressed by the cleanliness of the office that they want to do business with them, they're securing their job, and they're making the business a better place. All of those things matter.
So what we're talking here, advocacy starts way before that. It starts in the sense of, I guess, not just casting the vision of the company, but creating that sense of purpose for the individual, isn't it? So they know why they're turning up for work, and the role they play is part of a bigger picture that will have a greater impact on customers, clients, wherever they do.
Yeah, it's like a scene from a movie where you go into a restaurant and the waiter comes over to read you the specials. And he goes, but I wouldn't eat any of that stuff. There's the opposite of a brand advocate. Don't try the soup. Instead, I sampled it today, and I'm so proud to serve it to you because it's delicious and you're going to want it. Now, the benefit to him as the waiter is, first of all, if it's good, the person's going to keep coming back. Here in the States where we have the tipping culture, probably the tip's going to be better because the waiter guided him to a better experience at the restaurant. And when that person leaves the restaurant, because of the internal advocate who was promoting the soup instead of saying, don't drink, don't eat that, you now have a customer who can become an advocate for that restaurant, who goes home and says, hey, we got to go back to that restaurant and let's tell everybody what a great experience it was.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting, the whole restaurant piece, because I know when like restaurants create new menus, what good restaurants do, then all the staff try all the different dishes to ensure they know what's in it, what it tastes like, and so they can talk with confidence. And that's part of not just the engagement piece, that's the advocacy side of things, where they really do know how it really works. So how do we translate that into other organizations? How do we get to a place where we've got our employees really engaged, knowing about our purpose, and they really become advocates? They just like that guy on the airplane talks about proudly about the connectors that he was making for this plane that you're flying. Yeah.
Let me, as I respond to that, just an opposite stories. I just took my first long business trip since COVID. I was an 8-hour drive away and had to stop for breakfast at a restaurant. And I was sitting at the counter eating breakfast. And the chef from the cook from the restaurant went to the cash register and was paying something. And I said, well, what are you paying for? And he goes, oh, they only give us half off on our meals here. So you work for a restaurant and you don't get a meal. Nah, they're too damn cheap. There's the opposite of what we were just talking about. He then made me wonder why am I going to frequent a restaurant that doesn't treat their employees who are cooking our food every day to give them something to eat. So, it really does matter. So going back to that engagement that you were asking about, most people would say, well, it starts with paying them well, which of course is a factor. But how well are you training your people so they're confident in their job? How often are you engaging with employees in the improvements of the company? So if you're going to do an improvement to one of your products, do you only put your engineers and designers at the table? Or do you bring other people from other areas of the business that might have ideas that can help and get them engaged and involved in what the company's doing? In a lot of companies that have implemented like lean manufacturing standards, you're going to do an improvement in the manufacturing line for a certain stage. You might have someone from the HR department. You might have somebody from accounting sitting in the room to help find the solution to the problem that you brought people to the table that don't know the problem, so you get fresh eyes. But the other reason you do it is so that they recognize what other people in the building and feel part of that community that is your business.
Yeah, and I've been involved in organizations where we've launched new products, and we get not just the sort of brand marketeers involved or the NPD people, but actually we get almost a project team from around the business. And it's elements of people knowing what other people do, but also people creating ideas, but it also fundamentally creates this bigger engagement piece and knowledge as well. And that's really important, isn't it? Knowledge of, the fact that I'm making a connector. What does that do? Is it part of a bigger piece of a jigsaw perhaps the company does, or what it sells it onto? And I think that's really important, isn't it, to try and communicate that.
I've even seen it where companies have taken a key supplier in on those types of meetings, not just because they want better understanding of the use of materials, but so that the supplier becomes an advocate for them also. So that, hey, they involve us in the process. We have a seat at the table. We have a relationship. And also I've seen it where people have gone back to customers who have had issues and said, we recognize the issues that you had and your feedback is so valuable to us. Why don't you join us at the table? We'll pay you for a day's time to be part of our team to help us develop the next product so that customers who we value like you become more satisfied. And I've seen that happen. And it's a powerful tool.
No, it is. And so how do we take that sort of principle and, we live in the social media world and people post things and people share things. And yes, they might share things on an airplane, less likely at the moment because not many people are flying, but people do share quite frequently on social media. So how do you take an employee and get them to a place where they start to share stuff about their company, whether that's posts that the company's sharing, but also stuff they're doing, but also done in a way that won't damage the brand as well? I mean, how do we, because it can be quite risky as well, can't it?
Well, it can be if you're not running your business in a way that fosters that kind of mindset. But believe me, if you're not running the business, they're out there advocating against you anyhow. So, if for example, in an organization, and I see it all the time, on Tuesday, we're going to be posting social media. Everyone in the building is required to share this post. It's sort of an odd thing to do, and it may have a short-term effect. But when people in the building want to do that because they feel like it's going to secure their job, make their work better, grow the business, possibly get bonuses, raises, all of those positive things that people can get out of the workforce, more pride in what they do, they'll want to do that. So it really, what you're asking is, how do you run your business in a way that people will want to automatically? And I think those answers are obvious if you stop looking at your employees as an expense and start looking at them as a true asset to the company, a true part of the success, and treat them that way.
And it's not going about it in a functional sort of way, is it really? It's again, it goes back to that inspiring people, making them feel wanted, welcomed, they contribute, and then providing them tools and assets to do whatever they need to do on social media. But actually, it's not about dictating to them and telling them, because that doesn't really motivate anybody, does it?
Yeah, it goes back to dating. I mean, if you really want to be successful dating, you don't spend your time making demands and talking about yourself. You engage that person so that they want to talk and tell about themselves. I mean, one of the powerful things that I've seen happen, and really these posts aren't as much for the public as they are for the internal advocacy. A group of people from the company graduated with a degree this year. Do a post about how proud you are of your employees for getting a degree, or your employees went out and volunteered for a charity that helped homeless people. You put it out on the LinkedIn. Yeah, there's people out in the world that may see that as a benefit, and it may help breed some advocacy outside. But it also says to your internal employees, I'm so proud of you for the great things that you do in the name of our company. Thank you. And that personal recognition helps build that advocacy also. And when you've got employees that are advocates, and people, even subcontractors and folks that aren't actually employed by your company that are related, I use the example that the guy out cutting the grass in the parking lot that will turn off the mower and tell someone, no, the entrance is over there, sir. is part of the advocacy, as opposed to I'm the guy cutting the grass. What do I know? Which doesn't benefit you. So when companies are contracting outside services, they need to have the brand advocacy conversation about, when your people are on our property, they have to behave in this manner, or we're not going to do business with you, because we want to foster that advocacy with anyone who touches our customers, especially on our property.
And you make a point there, and it's all about the touch points, isn't it? And it's almost having that every touch point, that brand is true, it's the same, whole values, but all that's coming through, isn't it? Every touch point.
Well, I started to get curious about this with luxury brands and ones that people advocate for in the commercial space, or in the consumer space, I should say. So like if you're a Nike guy, or you're a Gucci or whatever, you have, especially in the higher luxury brands like Gucci and those things, you've got thousands and thousands of people that are advocates for those brands that will never buy the product. They're just so enamored by the brand itself that they're out there. Oh, it's, they see someone in it and they compliment them. Luxury cars and things like that. Well, in the industrial space, most people don't have that mindset. But I'll give you an example. Years ago, a great Fortune 100 company that's well known, 3M. I was involved in trying to get them out of the market so that we could win when I was living in Brazil selling adhesive tape against 3M. And the most common expression that we would hear when we were offering a product that we could prove had better quality in that particular, better price, better delivery, better conditions to pay, all of the things that you would think were important. And the response from the buyer was, yeah, but nobody ever got fired as a buyer for buying 3M. In other words, their brand is so strong in the industrial space that we're willing to not even look at alternatives, because I have job security, because I'm such an advocate. And if 3M screws up, I can blame them, and it's not my fault, because you didn't take that risk that ended up causing the failure. You chose 3M. So when you're an industrial brand where people say things like that, it's the absolute proof of what we're talking about, brand advocacy, true voracious advocacy. Yeah, I know you got a better deal, but if something went wrong with you, I get fired. If I stay with them, I'm the guy. I keep my job.
And do you think 3M were intentional about that? I mean, there are obviously some companies out there who have got amazing advocacy, internally, externally, and everything. And is it because they're intentional about how they go about it?
I can't say, because I've never worked in their organization, although in multiple times in my life in different product segments, I've competed against them. And it's consistent enough that at some point it became the jargon of the buyer space, whether it was in adhesives, whether it was in tape, whether it was in coatings. There was always that, even in the graphics world, where selling the stuff they wrap vehicles with, it's a mantra that you hear. So I can only imagine that at some point, if it wasn't intentional, it stuck and became intentional.
Right.
So,
and I guess we need to be intentional about this, don't we? I mean, it starts with when you take, it's the whole process of, like, even before you interview somebody for your organization, that's where it starts in terms of bringing new employees in. I guess it's important at every aspect, every touch points. So when you go into organizations, you talk about this and you help small, medium-sized businesses, because obviously in some ways it can be quite overwhelming, thinking, crumbs, I've got so many touch points. Mm-hmm. Where do they need to really focus on to enable them to have that greatest impact to create, especially the employee engagement and advocacy?
Well, it actually begins internally and externally at the same time. It's a balance. But as you're encouraging the internal team to think about the value of all of their employees as you're implementing new marketing and new strategies within the company, it starts to foster. And usually you find champions within the organization who can make it happen. And there's always going to be that one guy who, no matter what, hates his job, just, and I've heard the expression lots of times that your brand is only as good as the most disgruntled employee who happens to bump into one of your customers. But the internal part takes time. But once once the ball gets rolling, it's like a snowball going down a hill. It gets bigger and bigger, and more people start to have that positive. It usually starts from the top. It starts from the leadership, from the executive team on down. That as they start to truly show value, show the next level of that sort of org chart, the value, and encourage them to do the same, it filters down through the whole organization. And when it comes to the market, it has to do with really understanding who your customer is and what are their needs and desires and what excites them, and doing qualitative research and really understanding that. We find that most new engagements that we have think that they understand their customer until after we start talking to the customer and realize that the very things that they thought that the customer holds dear are not the things that matter to the customer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so there's I suppose in some ways there's a strategic piece and there's almost tactical piece. And I suppose the strategic piece is the sort of, I guess, starting with the leadership, almost the overarching. We want to become more able to get employees to be more brand advocates. What are some of the tactical things they may do to enable that internally? You alluded to something like champion, key champions in the business.
Yeah. Well, I've seen, and the sarcastic version of it is the CEO of the company once a month goes down, grabs a broom, and sweeps around in the factory. Because, well, I'm engaging with my people, and I show them I'm at the same. Nonsense. How about going down to the plant and pulling people aside and saying, not how are you today, but what do you think about this? In other words, we've got this process going on. Do you have ideas that could make this process better? Valuing and asking questions as if, and it is, every person in the plant can be a valuable asset to the growth of the business. And you never know. I've heard stories where we've talked about this, and the CEO or the head of operations or whatever starts talking to an employee and discovers one of the guys on the floor immigrated from an Eastern European country where he was a top engineer. And now he's in the plant because his language skills aren't. And they discover things about people. And the only way you can do that is to truly engage, not in a fake way, but truly ask people, tell me about your background. Where have you worked before? What do you do? What are your aspirations in the company? What could we do to help you get to the next level? And engage people on that way, that how can we benefit you as the employee? What can we do to make your life better? And you may not be able to do what they're asking, but the fact that you asked and that you engaged with those people, showing them that you do value, that they're not just a guy who can be replaced if he's not performing, starts to breed a level of respect. Just the occasional, I know it sounds silly, but the occasional fist bump when you walk through the plant and say, it's good to see you today. You guys are doing great work, and be specific as to what that great work means. So it's not just an empty.
No, I agree with you. I think it's funny. What it boils down to, all this, is almost creating a great place to work, a place where people enjoy turning up, and therefore if they enjoy turning up and doing their job, feel valued, feel engaged. They feel the CEO leadership are transparent, they're involved, they're connected. Then by default, people will talk about that in the positive sense. And
we hear
that's the crux of it. That's the sort of overarching. Is there any things that you could help employees be more intentional with their advocacy as well?
Yeah, I mean, if
you're a false way, I'm not talking, take this little leaflet, or here's a little asset for you to put on social media. I'm talking as any sort of things that would help them to be more positive in that sense.
Yeah, it really, they're going to want to automatically, but engage. Let them know, hey, if you're working during the day and you've got an idea that can help, let us know. If there's a challenge that's going on in the building that's how can we reduce waste? How can we? You're the expert. This is your department. Even the guys that have the most, what we would consider to be menial tasks, have ideas and have interests and can find ways to do things better. And if you don't engage them, they're just a guy doing a menial task. As soon as they're engaged, they become part of the business community, and they're more interested in its success, and they behave that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just has to be real.
And that's the key thing. It's being real, not forced or false.
Yeah.
And just before we finish, in terms of what would be your thoughts to companies right now in terms of creating that engagement within the companies as we sort of come out of lockdowns or come out of being hiding away at home? What would be your thoughts on that for this year?
Yeah, I think as people, if they're coming back in the office environment, that they need to have a feeling of safety. Whether you do or don't, if you're one of the people who thinks the whole thing was a hoax, or you're a person who's terrified by, to the opposite extreme reaction to the pandemic, you got to recognize that people have had a massive life shift one way or another. Make sure that the environment is inviting, and before they come back, ask them, what do you expect? Are you going to need something different for your workspace that'll make you feel more comfortable coming back? Gather ideas, have meetings just to talk about how life is going to be different at the office. The other is, you probably are aware of issues that were going on in your office that were a problem that you had intended to address. Now's the time to address them before people come back. If you make that environment more inviting than it was when they left, people are going to recognize that you value their return.
Absolutely. No, it's good advice. And just before we close, how can people get in touch with you, Andrew, and sort of connect with you?
Just, telex, fax.
send you a letter in the post.
Yeah, we've got a cage on the roof for the carrier pigeons that show up. No, they can reach me on our website, fangledtech.com. I'm readily available for connecting with folks that we have relevant reason to be connected with on LinkedIn. You can go on YouTube or all of those funny places where podcasts exist if you don't want the video version, and check out the Fangled cast. Just look up the word Fangled cast as one word and join the conversation. It's lots of places to find me.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your insights on how companies can get brand advocates out of their employees.
And thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you.